Yeah, welcome to the jumpsuit sewing class. This is the right side and this is the wrong side. Okay, so this is what we have here along this shoulder, and I want my pleats to face this way, so let me just change it and you see it. So you see, this is the top of the triangle. This is the first notch towards the neckline. I'm going to hold it and place it against this second notch such that this high part of this triangle folds inward. Are you seeing that? So I've matched the two notches here. This is the top of the triangle at the middle, so we're going to either cut this part away or I fold it inward this way so it doesn't affect the look. So this is what we're going to do. I'm going to hold this toe and pin it down. So note that I don't need this and I don't need all of this, okay? I can either cut it out or I fold it inward this way. So I've done one part. I'm just going to pick this other one and do something similar to it. This is what we had before. So I'm picking the first notch. This triangle is going to fold inward this way. So I'm placing it against the second notch. So right now, your notches are lifesaver. So are you seeing how I changed the direction of the pleats? So the pleats were facing this way before, now I've turned them around and they are now facing here. So you just put these two notches together, make sure they are matching, and you hold down with a pin. So we have this. So remember, I don't need this, so I can cut it out or I can fold it in, I can trim it out, or do as I please with it. Just make sure it's not, you don't want the neckline to be bulky. Okay, if you cut here, then you still have a bit bulky neckline. So I may just prefer to fold it in this way. Or I cut a part of it and just find a way to hide it this way. Okay, while I was trying to fold it inward, I realized it was affecting this plate in a funny way. So what I'm going to do is to hold here down with a pin, and I'll just trim here. Okay. Okay, so now we have our neckline and other side, this shoulder side in place. So now I need my facing. So with the right side of the facing the right side of the fabric, I'm going to sew my facing by 1/2 inch. I'm going to run 1/2 inch stitch along the neckline. So the first step is done. I'm just going to use my scissors to notch through this neckline. Be sure not to cut through your stitch. So once you're done notching, turn here around and top stitch on the facing by 1/8 inch, just a tiny stitch at the edge of your facing here. Okay, so here's my facing, top stitch by 1/8 inch along this part. And so the next thing you should do now is to tuck in the facing. That's this way. Just put it at the wrong side of your top and iron the seam in so that it rests properly. Okay, so just go to the pressing iron and give this a good press and set aside. So now we're going to fix the dart for the back, the dart and the facing. So remember, I already notched the dart point of my back piece. So I'm just going to sew from inside 1/2 inch dart and taper it down towards the apex of the dart. So I'll do the same on the both side, and we'll now fix the facing. So the facing should be splitted into two, just like the front, and just like the back piece was actually. Okay, so we'll treat this facing the same way we treated the front facing. So here is the back piece with the dart sewn in. Now I'm going to fix the facing on the back piece. So just like we did for the front, you're going to lay the facing on the cloth, right side facing the right part here, and I'm going to sew here by 1/2 inch. So with my facing sewn in here, I'm going to take a scissors and notch the seam allowance. So I'm just creating tiny notches. So the next thing I'll do is to turn here this way with the sewing allowance towards the facing. Then I'll top stitch here by 1/8 inch. So here is my top stitch by 1/8 inch here. And if you have an overlocker, you should overlock the edge of your facing, both for the front and the back. This is the front facing, so all around the front facing and along the back facing. So I'll just go ahead and do exactly this to the other piece for my back. So this is the front piece again. This is the facing this way. So after giving here a good press, I've not done mine, sorry. So after giving here a good press, you're going to sandwich the shoulder in between. Okay, this is for this, and this one is for this part. Okay, let's treat this part together. So I have the back, this is the back facing, and this is the back piece. So I'm going to sandwich the whole of the front. That's the front piece, the front bodice with the front facing held together. Okay, so I'm going to sandwich it, place the right side of the back facing the right side of the front, and I'll sandwich it in between the back piece and the back facing. So the whole of the front is going to go between these two. Okay, and I'm going to sew by 1/2 inch allowance. So that way we are enclosing the front in between the back piece and the back facing. Okay, so the zip part of the back should be towards the center front this way. I hope you understand what I'm saying. Okay, so now I'm just going to sew here by 1/2 inch. Okay, let me do it all over again. I don't want to get you confused. So this is the front, the right side of the front piece, and this is the facing this way. You know, the facings are always facing inward. So now I'm going to place the back piece on top. You know, we have two back pieces. So this is the zip part of the back piece. Okay, so I'm going to place the back piece on top, the right side facing the right side of the front piece, and now I'll raise the facing and sandwich this shoulder in between the shoulder for the back and that of the facing. Okay, so that way we have covered the front, and I'll sew here by 1/2 inch. So I've just sewn it in, and now I'm going to turn the back this way. So we have a neatly finished shoulder line. Okay, so this is the front piece and the back piece, and we have here. So I'm just going to go ahead and do the same thing to this other side, sandwiching the front between the front face and the back facing and the back piece. I'm going to sew by 1/2 inch. So now I have the shoulder part of my jumpsuit fixed. This is the back and this is the front joined together in the shoulder. So the next thing I'll be doing now is to pick up my sleeve, and you can make yours a long sleeve like I said earlier on. Remember the notch we created for the front here is going to come in handy when we are fixing. So but before then, pick up your sleeve and fold in your sewing allowance. So if you've added 1/2 inch, go ahead and sew it. That's if you added 1 inch, rather 1/2 inch is too small. 1 inch allowance at least. Go ahead and sew. If it was 2, you're going to fold 1 and another 1. That's 2 inches allowance. You go ahead and fold it in, sew it in, and then give it a press on the ironing table before fixing it on your jumpsuit. Okay, so this is mine, and I'm sewing in by 1 inch, so half an inch twice. Okay, half an inch and another half an inch. So when making your fold, remember not to pull, don't pull your fabric. In fact, when sewing anything at all, don't pull, just hold. So I'll just fold the other one in and go give this a press before we fix it. So this is a body piece, and I have 2 pieces of my sleeve here. So now I'm going to pick up the sleeve for the left. How will you know the one that is for the left and the one for the right? Remember, we notched the front of our sleeve. Okay, this notch here is for the front and this for the shoulder line. So if I place this way, okay, this is actually the wrong side of the sleeve. So if I place it this way, the notch part comes towards the front, and that's perfectly fine. On the other hand, if I place the right side of the sleeve against the right side of my bodice, if I use this sleeve and I place it that way, you see that the notch part goes towards the back. So this is not the sleeve for this side of the bodice. So if you do it this way, you see that the notch part goes towards the front. I hope you understand what I'm saying. So I'm just going to hold the middle of my sleeve against the shoulder part of my bodice, and we're going to sew by half an inch all the way to the armpit here. So this notch part of my sleeve goes towards the front, and the one that is not notched goes towards the back. So it depends on you. It's not like you must notch the front. You may decide you want to notch the back. Just note when you are sewing that the notch part goes towards the back. That's just all. So it's just an indicator, and that's what it is. Now I'm done sewing in my sleeve by half an inch. The next thing I'll be doing is to notch round the sleeve. Remember to notch round any curvy parts you sew. This is just to help the seams relax properly. So I sew by just half an inch, and that's the sewing allowance we added when we created our sleeve. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and fix the sleeve for the other part of my jumpsuit. So once the sleeve is fixed, we'll just set this upper part aside and work on the trouser part of the jumpsuit. First, we'll be joining the crotch of the front piece together, which I've done here. So I sew here by half an inch. Next, we'll be fixing the dart. So we already know the dart positioning. That's what we had on our paper. I'm just going to make a 4.5 inches long dart. I know what I drafted on the paper was more than that, but I'm going with a 4.5 inches long dart. So which will be 1 inch wide. That's half an inch on both sides. 1 inch. 1 inch wide and 4.5 inches long on the both sides. Our front dart is fixed. Okay. And I'll just pick the back piece. Remember, we added half an inch allowance around the waist and on the side closer to the waist here for the zip allowance. Okay, so while joining these two together, you're not going to join the whole place together. We have half an inch like up until here. You can take your pattern to confirm or to just draw out that allowance so that you can sew in the parts you need properly. So we have half an inch this way, and then it reduced to 1 inch zip allowance this way, and it reduced to half an inch towards the crotch. Okay, so now what you're going to do is to leave open about, let's say, 7 inches down or even 8 inches down for the zip. Okay, and start sewing. So at this point, it is no longer half an 1 whole inch like this part. Okay, we're going to take about a little bit above half an inch, and you're going to reduce it to half an inch towards this part, and then you just sew here down. So when we're fixing zip, you're going to use 1 inch here and just reduce the allowance gradually. You can just take your pattern and mark out that line to guide you if there's any confusion. I already notched the dart positioning with a dot here to indicate the end of my dart. So normally I should just pick this up and sew half an inch here while gradually reducing the width at the apex of the dart. But then you have to consider the back. You have to consider the back dart. Because we are going to join these two together at the end of the day, we don't want irregularities in the width of the dart. We want the dart to look like it is continuous. Okay, so we're just going to change the position of this dart. So instead of making use of what I drafted before, you should probably consider that while drafting your pattern. But if you miss that like I did, just quickly make a correction before you go on. So now I'm just going to measure. Now I'm going to measure from the zip allowance on this side. I'm going to measure the distance between the zip allowance and the position of the dart. That's the middle center of the dart. So here it is 4.5 inches. So I'm going to correct that on my papers. And that, I don't want to directly mark this on the cloth because the dart here is slanted. So if I'm not careful, I won't get it right. So including the zip allowance, I'm just going to take 4.5 instead of the 5 inches I have here, 4.5. So I'll come down and mark the same 4.5. Draw another dart, half an inch to 1 inch dart. So now I'm going to place it on the back piece to reposition my dart. So I'm just going to place this pattern back here, mark the center of my new dart or notch, then mark the apex. So I'll do the same thing on the other side. I'm marking the apex. So I'll go ahead and notch that point. So now I'm going to take a 1 inch dart, that's half an inch on both sides, hold it in and hold the apex of the dart, then sew it down. That's that on one side. I'll just take the other side and do the same. So we have the back dart fixed. So now we are going to put the lower and upper piece together, I'm just going to pick up the back piece and so this is one back piece. I'm going to lay this pant part on it and hold here in. So from the zip allowance for the back for the upper and the lower bodies, that's the pants trouser part of it and the upper bodies. So I'm going to sew these two together by 1/2 inch. Remember that your dart must align with each other so that you create a straight dart. So we're going to sew that together and sew up until this edge. So I'll do the same thing to the other side. Our jumpsuit is coming together here. I've attached the upper and lower part of the back. So I'm going to weave here before doing any other thing. So I'm going to weave it at the waistline just so it looks neat. So right now I want to work on the pocket. I'll pick up my trouser piece, the front part of my pant, and we're just going to fix this pocket the way we did during the trouser class. So this is the trouser facing. You must make sure that your trouser facing is the same fabric, or at least this top part that will be exposed outside here is the same color with your fabric, except if you're trying to create a design. Okay, you see this? So if you're using another material for this, it won't work. You can use another material and cut out a piece of this to create like a curve here, just so this same color reflects, except if you're trying to create a design. Okay, so I decided to make use of this lining because this part is going to be hidden inside. So right now I'll just place this. We're going to go through the process we did during the pant making class, the same process we used. I'm going to sew in here by 1/2 inch, and I'll be doing exactly the same thing on the other side. So I'm done sewing the pockets by 1/2 inch. So I just place notches along the curve to help it relax. So now I'm going to turn this in and top stitch from the front by 1/4 inch. So before top stitching, give your pocket a good press to give it a very neat finished look. Okay, so now we're going to attach the pocket facing to this piece, and we'll make use of a French seam. So rather than turning, this is what we want to achieve at the end of the day, right? So but rather than sewing these two together directly this way, although if you have woven the edge of this, if you have overlocked it, you may not need to follow this process. So but rather than sewing this way, we're going to sew the other way. So that's what a French seam means. Basically, you sew two pieces of clothing together twice. Okay, you sew wrong side facing each other first, then you trim and turn it all around, then top stitch. Okay, so just watch this again. So this is what we want to achieve at the end of the day. But instead of sewing here directly this way, you're going to sew the other way. That's the wrong side facing each other. So I'm going to sew it all around by 1/4 inch. Now I'm done sewing the wrong side facing each other. I'm done sewing the two pieces together. So what it means is that the rough side shows on the inner part of the pocket this way, Okay, but then we want to achieve a neat finishing. That way we don't want any roughness showing inside the pocket. So we're going to pick it up, trim out any excess we have here, then sew it again. Okay, we're going to sew it this way, so that way we have a neat finishing inside, and outside a fairly neat finishing as well. So the first thing I'll do is turn it this way, trim any excess fabric poking out, then I'm turning it in and sewing by 1/4 of an inch again. So by the time you add up your two sewing allowance, 1/4, 1/4, that's half an inch at the end of the day. So now I'm going to sew around the pocket till we get here by 1/4 of an inch. Okay, so now I'm done with this piece. So you can see we have a neatly finished inner part of the pocket. So I'm just going to hold this down with a pin. And now we can attach this to the upper front piece by half an inch. Okay, so just pick up the front of your jumpsuit, the upper part of your jumpsuit, fold this way and notch the middle. So notch the center. Okay, so now place the right side of the upper body against the right side of this pocket, and make sure the midpoint you just notch aligns with the middle of your pant. Okay, so lay it against each other and sew by half an inch. Okay, so this is our jumpsuit so far. I've connected the upper and the lower part, and so the next thing I'll be doing now is to work on the back. So we'll be fixing a zip. So probably you already know how to fix zip. Okay, so before I do that, I'm going to weave this edge that seems open up. I've already done that to this side. Then I'm going to weave up this side. So here is the back, and I'm about to fix my zip. Okay, so remember the stitch we made here on the around the crotch, just before the crotch here for the back. Okay, first place your zip. I'm making use of a 24 inches zip, 24 inches long, and you can see it's extra long. Okay, so but most time, okay, I allow this join in here, that's this sewing we did at the side here, should be at least 7 to 8 inches below the waistline. Okay, so just so you can wear the jumpsuit properly. Okay, so mine is, I think, exactly 7 inches thereabouts, so I'll just leave it this way. Okay, so I'm going to raise this up and fix on this side first. Okay, I'm going to place the right side of the zip against the right side of this side of the jumpsuit, the right side of the jumpsuit. So I'm going to place it this way, making sure the stopper is below the joining with facing here. Okay, so I'm going to sew by 1 inch. That's the 1 inch sewing allowance. Okay, so you can pin around if it's going to get confusing. So I'm going to sew by 1 inch. So I've placed the stopper of the zip up there, and I'm just going to sew. So just after escaping this stopper, I'm going to zip up because I find it easier to sew my zip when it's zipped than when it's open. So I'm going to continue sewing by 1 inch, leaving the 1 inch zip allowance we have here. So when you get to the top here, zip down a little bit just so you can sew this edge properly. So our zip is fixed now. Okay, so I'm just going to open it up a little bit. Then this is my facing. I'm going to turn my facing around to enclose this upper edge of the zip. So I'm turning the facing around to hold it in, and I'm going to sew. Okay, so when you do this, just turn it around and you see you have neatly finished the back neckline. Okay, so you have this. I'll do the same thing to the other side right away. So we have this again. I'm going to open it up, making sure that this zip is folding inward. Turn it around and then sew in the main piece with the zip. Okay, so with the zip fixed and everything in place, I'm going to come to the trouser part of the jumpsuit. Okay, I'm going to place the crotch of the front over the crotch of the back, just the way we did while sewing the trouser. And we're going to sew the inseam, which is the inner part of the trouser, from the crotch to the hem of the trouser on the both side. Okay, so with the trouser inseam sewn in by 1/2 inch, now we're going to join the back and the front together. So you can use especially for the front, a hemming glue to hold this down, or you simply tack it. Okay, you can tack along here, or you even leave it that way. It may not pull off. Okay, so hold the edge together. Remember, we have 1 inch seam allowance on both sides. Okay, so I'm just going to sew in 1 inch from here, making sure that the waistline aligns with each other, the armpit here aligns with each other, and I'll just go ahead and sew the side by 1 inch, and also this other side by 1 inch as well. Okay, but if you're scared to just sew right away, probably you're not sure of your measurement, so hold the sides together, make sure that the armpit matches. Hold the armpits together. Okay, and do the same thing on the other side. Then you take your tape rule and mark it out. Okay, so my bust is 40 inches, so I can mark 41 inches. I can mark 10.25 here, so I can mark this out with a chalk. You mark it. So you come to your sleeve, put it together this way. So come to your sleeve, put it together this way, hold it and mark your upper arm sleeve. Then mine is about 15 inches thereabout, so I'll just mark 15 inches here. So you come to this part of your sleeve and also place your tape rule and mark. Okay, so you mark your arm circumference. Mine is 7 here, and here is 7.5, so mark it out. Okay, then you mark your bust. Okay, then you come here and mark the waist. Mine is 8.5, so I really like the waist tight, so mark it and connect your dots. Then come down by whatever waist to hip circumference you used when cutting. Cut it down, and then you mark the hip. Okay, so remember the lower part is free, so you don't really need to measure. You don't really need to measure the lower part of the pant. So just go ahead and continue sewing, making sure that the edges align with each other, and continue sewing by 1/2 inch all the way down. Okay, so we'll do that on one side and do the same thing to the other side. Let's go. So now I'm starting with the sleeve. I will just go ahead with sewing 1 inch in. I'm comfortable with sewing 1 inch in. So making sure the armpits aligns with each other here. Anyway. So making sure the waistline aligns with each other. So this is the pocket. I usually fold mine in because I want a free, but you can as well sew it along the seam this way. Okay, so I'm done with one side. I'll just turn this around to the other side and sew by the same allowance. Once again, if you are not very sure of yourself, you can measure half your bust circumference across the front this way. Although it will be hard, and that's because of the darts we transferred. But then I'm just going to sew mine by 1 inch like I did on the other side. So having joined the sides of the side seam of my jumpsuit together, the last major thing we'll be doing here is to take in the folds. Okay, so the hemming allowance, if you have added 2 inches, whatever allowance you have added, is the time to fold it in. So I like making use of hemming glue, but that does not mean you cannot sew yours. Okay, you can sew it in. Okay, so I took out 2.5 inches, right, for my hemming allowance. So I'm just going to fold maybe 1 inch, then another 1.5 this way. Then I'll iron it and put a hemming glue in between to hold it down. So I like using a hemming glue because it just gives a nice finishing here. So you can also fold and iron, then tack the way you see on men's trouser. Okay, tack along the allowance this way, or you can just sew it on your sewing machine. But I don't really like the whole stitch at the hem showing all around, so it's not going to look as neat as if you either tack it or you use a hemming glue. If you have added 2 inches, just take in 1 inch and another 1 inch. If you have added 2.5, you can take in 1 inch and then you take 1.5 inches. Okay, hemming allowance, then you sew it or hem it. That's just it. And I'll show you exactly how to use the hemming glue to fold here in. So this is the hem of my pants. I'm just going to fold in my allowance. Okay, so I've made the first fold and iron in, so I'm making the second fold now. Okay, you may first hold it down with a pin. Okay, so now I'm done pinning my allowance inside, just so I have it straight. I'm still going to remove the pin. So I'm just going to iron it down, steam press So I've ironed it in. I don't really need this pin, so I'm going to pull it out. And this is my hemming glue. I'm just going to make double strip, and then I'll steam press it. Okay, so I'm putting it into this last fold. Okay, so I'm doing it gradually. Steam press. And then I'll remove this pin, put another layer. Do the same. I'll do the same thing till I get it all round. So after doing this, you can still go ahead and tack, but this will last. Okay, so you have this neatly finished edge.